What's up, everyone? This is Noa Dalzell, and I'm here with another episode of You Got Boston. This time from my home, as this was the first road trip of the year that I did not travel to. The Celtics fall 119-115 to the Minnesota Timberwolves. They dropped to 10-9 on the season, and it was a frustrating loss in the sense that I think there were a lot of good things, and they obviously have this awesome first half. They're up by 12 at the half, and things look great. Or up by 10 at the half, I should say, and things look great. And in the same vein, it was a really bad third quarter. They were outscored by 12 in the period. They go really cold for much of the second half, minus this late fourth quarter run. And they end up losing by 4 to a Timberwolves team that was expected to be a championship contender entering the season and has been closer to a 500 team. And they actually haven't really been beating above 500 teams. So kind of a mixed bag of what to expect there. But, they're at home. They are still, I think, the more talented team on paper. And we're the favorites to win this one. And they come away with the win. And I had a lot of fun watching this one, maybe because I enjoyed watching it from home and watching the broadcast and all of that. It's not something that I experience very often anymore, which I'm very grateful for. I love going in person as well. But the first half was just incredible, watching the way Jaylen Brown and Neemias Queta were both able to perform. Two players who were questionable entering the game. I mean, Jaylen was questionable with low back spasms. Queta was questionable with a left ankle sprain that he missed almost 2 games for, but one game in its entirety. But that was literally less than a week ago, right? That was on Sunday, and here he is the following Saturday, not just playing, but setting a new career high in rebounds with 18 boards against the Timberwolves front court that includes Rudy Gobert, Julius Randle, Naz Reid. And he grabs 18 rebounds, 19 points for him. And those two guys were your most reliable players, and they were both questionable game time decisions. So that in and of itself was really impressive to me. And to be honest with you, those two guys have probably become your two most important players, which Jaylen is no surprise, but I don't know that I would have ever been able to forecast that Neemias Queta would be putting together the kinds of performances on a nightly basis that he's putting in. And so this podcast theme has been kind of drawing positive takeaways from these games because we do a post-game show on CLNS Media, which you can check out in its entirety. Myself, John Zanis, Bobby Manning, we discussed this game for over an hour, including some of the backcourt struggles, the conundrum with Anthony Simons, Peyton Pritchard struggles tonight, all that. So you can hear all that there. But what I really wanted to focus on in this podcast is this development of Neemias Queta and the consistency with which he's playing, because that's the key, right? The difference between an NBA player that is a legit NBA player and somebody that sometimes looks good is enormous, right? A lot of guys can look good every other night or every 3 games. And for a while, that's what Queta was. He had moments last year where I'm like, okay, Queta looks great. And then the next game, he wouldn't look good. And then the next game, he would look good. And then the next game, he wouldn't look good. And that's how you become a backup center. I mean, he was their 4th center, right? He was not in the playoff rotation. He was oftentimes not even in the rotation. That's not the Neemias Queta of today. This guy is somebody who you can rely on to defend, to protect the rim, to be a lob threat. I think offensively, he's made tremendous strides with just as somebody who catching the ball by the basket, being in the right spot, and then as a rebounder, which was this team's number one concern, especially with how the season started. He's become a very good rebounder. And I think that was always in him. And offensively, he was always a good offensive rebounder. And you saw in Eurobasket, he put up some nice rebounding numbers, but he's really anchored them in that department. So this was one of his best games of the season. And I was really impressed because, like I mentioned, he's coming off of a week of rest. So it's hard when you're a guy who, he didn't practice earlier this week. He was ruled out immediately for Wednesday's game against the Pistons. He wasn't even questionable on the injury report. And then he comes here a couple of days later, and he looked winded at times, but he outplayed the Timberwolves front court, especially in that first quarter where he came out with just an energy that Rudy didn't have. And Rudy is a Hall of Famer, and he's I think 4-time Defensive Player of the Year and all that, but Queta got the best of him in this game. And that is a big takeaway both for this season, because the big weakness for this team is their front court and whether Queta can continue to be an anchor there, but also long-term, like I think they found a guy that is a center for the future as well. And that was the hope when they were not able to re-sign Al Horford or Luke Kornet. The Celtics hoped and believed that Queta could fill into that starting center role, but it was a giant question mark. Nobody really knew how it was going to play out. And I think you have to be very happy if you are a Celtics fan, if you are a member of the front office, you're a member of the coaching staff, with his development and his consistency on a nightly basis. I think when it's all said and done, he's going to be a guy that is averaging a double-double. And right now he's averaging about 8 rebounds per game. But This is, the game that he exited in the first quarter. There's been a couple blowouts, but in general, I think that he's going to be a double-double guy because that's the kind of player that he is, and his rim protection has also been a lot better than I had anticipated. Entering this game, if you look at the NBA's net rating leaders, there are 10 players on that list. I believe Queta and Steven Adams of the Rockets were the only non-Oklahoma City Thunder players on that list. So it is just remarkable how effective they have been when he has been on the floor, how much of a better defensive team they have been in particular, but just how much of a better team they've been. And in this game, I did not know what to expect. I actually didn't think he was going to play because I thought that ankle sprain that, he immediately leaves the game. He's a big guy, all that. I thought that he was going to miss a couple of games, and I've already seen some reporting online suggesting that he is pretty much 100%. I think it was Gary Washburn or Jay King, the two reporters that are out in Minnesota right now that shared that out. So that's excellent news. Excellent news that he's healthy, but then also that I think early on he had some nice games against the Washington Wizards or against teams that just don't have a very established front court. And so you wonder, okay, what, maybe Queta looks good against these guys, but how is he going to look when he goes up against the top NBA bigs? And this is not it's not like he went up against Jokic. The defensive challenges are going to be much bigger with other front courts, but just battling on the glass, size wise, this is a big Minnesota Timberwolves team that has always had for the last few years has had a really good front court. And so big ups to him, big bonus to him, credit to him for being able to put forth that type of performance coming off an injury and also against this competition. And I continue to be really encouraged and impressed. And I had high hopes, especially from watching him in Eurobasket. I thought he looked really good at Eurobasket. He did some good things. But then he comes out of preseason. He didn't look great. He made a lot of mistakes. And I feel like he's been able to fix a lot of those things. And you're seeing it seems like he's just on this upward trajectory now with his play that has been super fun to watch and super encouraging. And then outside of Queta, I think the guy that you continue to feel very encouraged and impressed by is Jaylen Brown. And Jaylen Brown, to me, obviously he has to stay healthy and he has to maintain the play, but he is playing at an all NBA level. And he's obviously been an all NBA player before. So this will be his second selection if he kind of remains on track to do that. But he came out of the gates, had 19 points in the first quarter. And yes, he was looking for his shot. I mean, that's how you score 19 points in a quarter. But I also didn't feel like he was hogging the ball. And he has 5 assists at the half. And he had a couple of plays later in this game. There was one 3-point shot in the third quarter that I absolutely loved that he passed up. I think Queta got the offensive rebound. He passes to Payton. Payton passes to Jaylen. Jaylen passes to Baylor. And Baylor found Derek White in the corner, and Derek White hits the 3. And it was a perfect example of okay, Jaylen has 30 points right now. He's been on one tonight. He could have just taken the 3, but he swung the ball, and they got an open corner 3 out of it, which is obviously the best shot of basketball, right, for a very good 3-point shooter, Derek White. So my point being, he finishes this game with 41 points, 7 assists, 5 steals, 6 rebounds, a block. Just ridiculous. 5 steals in a basketball game is wild. But he finishes this game. He's shooting 17 of 33 from the field, 5 of 11 from 3. And he did go cold in the third quarter. And I think that was kind of a big reason for their turnaround there is that he was just providing this instant source of offense and he misses 4 or 5 shots in a row. But we're starting to take for granted, I think, these kinds of performances that Jaylen is putting forth. And I saw some NBA Twitter accounts saying today, Jaylen 1 Brown led offense is not a bad thing. They have the 5th best offense entering this game. I think that'll probably hold after this one. But I think you're seeing now that there's a certain gravity that he has and an ability to score against the NBA's most elite defenders that shouldn't have really come as a surprise given his pedigree as a star in this league. But still, I think there was some doubt, right? There was some doubt about what is Jaylen Brown going to look like without Jason Tatum playing alongside him. Jason Tatum has been there for his entire career. Jaylen has always played with another all-star. He is not playing with another all-star right now. And his numbers and his efficiency is better than ever. And I do think that he's giving the Celtics team a fighting chance every single night. And you could look at 41 points on 32 shots and say, okay, he's just shot chucking. I think there are always people who look at stat lines trying to think what players kind of get this reputation of maybe a Zach LaVine type of okay, this guy gets numbers and he does it on a bad team. That's not what's happening here. I really don't believe that. I think that the style that he's playing, the style that they're playing is effective. He's been highly efficient at the mid-range, just giving them another layer offensively. He's been finishing well around the basket. He's been hitting his threes at a decent clip, good enough clip for him, and 5 of 11 obviously is a good clip for him tonight. And so, and again, I think that he is attracting the type of gravity on the court that you would hope your star player does. So I don't look at this kind of game as like, okay, like Jaylen just put up numbers, but like in a losing effort. I think other guys didn't do enough, right? You look at Peyton Pritchard and Derek White combining for 3 of 16 from three. You look at Jordan Walsh being one of your 5 starters going scoreless in this game. And it's not specifically Jordan, but like you're just not getting enough points from other players that are playing significant minutes. And so you look at what Jaylen's been able to do, though 7 assists and 41 points for himself. They only score 115 as a team. Like he is really shouldering the load offensively. And by every metric, this team's offense has been really good, despite the fact they're not getting to the line often. He only attempted 4 free throws tonight, and one of them was a tech, so he only really drew 3 free throws. And I don't think that's sufficient. I actually don't think that his whistle has been super fair, and part of it is just I think how intentional he is in trying to draw fouls right now is. It seems like refs are kind of going in the opposite direction. I don't really know the psychology of the officials and all that, but you just have to applaud like this effort, and you have to think to yourself, if he's able to keep playing this way, if Tatum comes back, like they're going to be even better, because I think Jaylen took another leap this year, and it's going to be some sort of an adjustment, right? Obviously to share the ball with Tatum, but right now he needs more help on the offensive end, and I think even a not fully back to himself Jason Tatum will be an enormous help for Jaylen Brown on that end. So I'm curious to see kind of how it all plays out, and obviously there's a long season ahead. It's only been 19 games. And so, while in my head, seems like a lock for all NBA, obviously the Celtics team has to be a decent team. Like it's pretty rare for, a really bad team to have all NBA players. But Jaylen's done quite enough, to be in that conversation. And I don't know. I look back at this first half. He has 27 points at the half. He put up numbers. I think his final stat line has only ever been achieved by Larry Bird as far as Celtics players go, with the 5 steals. So it's just a lot of encouraging stuff. And again, I just don't view this as empty calories. And I'm sure some people will view it as that, because that tends to be the case when you look up at big scoring numbers. He takes a lot of twos. That certainly doesn't help with like the amount of shots that he's taking. And then anytime you score a lot in a loss, people kind of feel this way. But again, I think if they win this game, if they make a couple more plays in that third quarter, a couple more plays down the stretch, or if they, if Peyton doesn't help off of Mike Conley, he doesn't hit that 3, and then they go ahead and they score in that final possession, like who's to say the Celtics will win this game? And then the discussion is like, wow, Jaylen Brown just had an all-time game to propel the Celtics team once again over an opponent that should be better than them on paper. So I'm just cognizant of the narratives and how quickly the narratives shift when you win or you lose a game, which is why honestly this podcast has been fun to record, because I get to think of what actually happened in this game, regardless of the final outcome. This game was tied with a minute to go. So was the Pistons game. And obviously we have a whole different takeaway from the Pistons game because they pull away with it. But for 47 out of the 48 minutes, this game was the same, right? And so I guess my point is that you have a legit 1A in Jaylen Brown. I do believe that. I'm sure some people still don't, because they're looking at this team and they're saying they're 10-9. But I think if you improve the supporting cast around him, you have a legit team that could be 14-5 right now. That's the kind of basketball that he's played. And is it sustainable for an entire season? I don't know. I haven't seen it, so we'll see. But so far through 19 games, that's the style of basketball, the level of basketball that he's played. And the good thing for him and the good thing for the Celtics and Celtics fans is that he doesn't have to carry it all on his own, because Jason Tatum is still on the roster and he will be back, whether later this year or next year. But in the meantime, I think you're seeing another leap from a guy who has had 4 or 5 big leaps already in his career. And that's exactly what you were hoping to see this year, right? Nobody knew he had his meniscus injury. He has offseason surgery. Nobody knew what he is going to look like after that, because he could have regressed further. And I do think that some of his athleticism seems to be reduced. Like he's not exploding around the basket the same way that he used to, but he has totally made up for it in other ways. So overall, he has gotten better in a season where some people thought maybe he would look worse, because he doesn't have the kind of weapons offensively around him that he used to. And he's coming off of kind of the first knee surgery of his career. So it was a lot of unknowns, and that is far and away the biggest takeaway I have from the first quarter of the Celtics season so far. And I want to give a quick shout out to our friends over at Prize Picks. This episode is brought to you by Prize Picks. It is the holiday season, the best time of the year for sports, bowl games, basketball matchups, playoff pushes. It is all happening at once. And while you and I are here making decisions every day, what gifts to buy, what to eat, which game to watch, there's one place where it feels good to be right: Prize Picks. I've been watching so many players play so well. Right now, somebody that I have my eye on is Austin Reeves, who has just been playing at a ridiculous level. Obviously, Jaylen Brown, we just saw it once again tonight. So you can look at their fantasy score, free throws made, field goal attempted, turnovers. I know a couple players who stack up really well on their turnovers. It is nobody on the Celtics, but players across the league. But right now, Prize Picks has early payouts. If your lineup gets off to a hot start, you may now have the option to cash out those winnings before the game even finishes. Is your fantasy season over? My team is cooked, but with Prize Picks, I don't have to wait until next year's draft. Prize Picks lets you play fantasy football every week, pick your favorite players, and win when they hit their projections every week. No draft required. Download the app today and use code CLNS to get $50 in lineups after you play your first $5 lineup. That's code CLNS to get $50 in lineups after you play your first $5 lineup. Prize Picks, it's good to be right. So I mentioned Jaylen Brown and I mentioned Neemias Queta, and I think those are the two guys that definitely headline this game and this conversation around this game. I'll also just give a shout out to Jordan Walsh, who I thought, in particular in the first half, was really strong defensively and continues to show that he can guard at an NBA level at a high rate. And I think he's somebody that is going to be helpful for this team moving forward, maybe for years to come, but definitely moving forward for the next year or two here. And tonight, I thought they got some good minutes from Baylor as well. Baylor did a lot of good things in that first half. They got some good minutes from Sam Hauser. Sam Hauser went a little cold in the second. He had a couple of three-point opportunities that would have been really helpful for them in that third quarter when they were not able to kind of get any easy looks. So nobody, like, we've talked a lot about how there's been every night there's like the Josh Minot game or the Ugo game or the Baylor game or whatever else it might be. Tonight there wasn't like a guy that broke through. And honestly, that might have been the difference in why they lose this one, because they just need more from somebody, right? When Jalen's going for 40 and Kate is giving you 19 and 18, and Derek White and Peyton Pritchard just weren't. I mean, Derek has 16, he had a big three down the stretch, and Peyton had 9. Like, that's not enough of a contribution from him, considering they just don't have a margin of error, right? Like last year's team, Jason Tatum could have had 9 points at times, and it was enough because there were so many guys that could contribute offensively. This year's team, you just can't afford multiple off nights. And so maybe part of what went wrong here is that there wasn't this like explosive burst from one of these guys. I thought Josh gave a couple of good minutes in the third quarter. He had a big three, he had a good offensive putback, he had a good defensive stop. Jordan had some good minutes in the first half. Sam had some good minutes in the first half. No Ugo in this one. I don't know if that would have helped or hurt, but Ugo had some big minutes against Detroit. So certainly maybe something you'll look at tomorrow night when they're playing the second night of a back-to-back. I would be surprised if we don't see Ugo lace up at all. But yeah, overall, I think that continues to be something that I really enjoy watching, like who is playing that fifth spot in the rotation, right? Because we know Peyton, Derek, Jaylen, Nimi, they have kind of established themselves as like the core four for this team. And that fifth spot has been multiple guys, and I really have liked what we've seen. And even tonight, I thought at spots you got really good things, whether it was Josh or Baylor or Jordan. Those were the three in this game. Ugo was a DNP, Xavier Tillman was a DNP, Chris Boucher was a DNP. So, and that's kind of been Chris and Xavier seems to be like the bottom two guys in the rotation. Amari Williams was with the team. He was not with Maine, so he's on this road trip. But I think as soon as Queta was ruled in, he was much less likely to play. Obviously, he gave you 15 minutes against the Pistons, but overall, I actually would have liked to see him just because why not? It's fun to see these new guys, but I think you got enough from Queta in this one. He played 29 minutes. Garza, they were a minus 13 in his 5 minutes. I think defensively, this was, some of these matchups are just not great Garza matchups. This might be one of them. But honestly, I don't have any major qualms with Joe Mazzulla's rotation in this game. But overall, I do think this was a very good game. This is probably as good as you're going to feel about a loss. They played really hard. I like the fact that even when they went down by 10 with 3 minutes left, they make that push and they tie it up. And Derek hits a big three, Jaylen hits a big three, Kata's engaged and active. Like everybody kind of played a role there because you want, like I talked about this in the last episode with, Texas with Bobby, but like you want to be a winning team, right? You want to be the kind of team that battles, that competes to the final buzzer. And I think this game was another indication of that. And they were outscored by 20 to begin the second half. They were outscored 49-29, and that's typically hard to overcome. But in general, I think that is the way they came back from that, the way they came out of the gates and kind of got on the right foot here. Like you have to be pleased with the effort and the culture that continues to be instilled in the Celtics team. Like you just that's the way I feel about it, honestly. And Anthony Edwards hits a crazy three to that said, that was kind of the dagger shot. A lot of great shot making from him in the second half. He told the reporters afterwards that Jaylen Brown giving him the too small woke him up, but those two guys are friends, so it's all kind of fun banter, fun back and forth. But listen, everybody thought this Pistons, Timberwolves, Cavs stretch was going to be like probably 3 losses or whatnot, but they split the first 2. They get the Cavs, Sunday night in Cleveland. That'll be another hard one. Second night of a back-to-back. We'll see how that plays out. But an inspiring effort overall. Like I really thought that this was a good performance against a pretty good Timberwolves team. They haven't been the best so far this season, but a lot to like. And obviously the big things you think about, as I've said this multiple times on this podcast, but the way I'm evaluating the season is like, how does this individual team look? What's their ceiling? What's their record? Were they winning games? And then also, what do you have moving forward? And this was another game that made me feel really good about what you have moving forward, whether that was Jaylen Brown as your star, whether that's Queta as your starting center, who I do think he's starting to prove that he might be a starting center. Like that was the big question, right? Is this guy a starting center in the NBA? And I think he is. And so that was another night kind of in that direction. And then, yeah, just good minutes from some of those guys that are kind of fighting for those wing minutes. That continues to be kind of a carousel of opportunity, but you're getting a lot of good stuff from those guys. Baylor hit an early 3. He's been shooting lights out this season as a footnote. 55% from 3 on the season, which is pretty ridiculous, especially considering how much he struggled at Summer League. So anyways, that's it for now. Shorter episode. We also have another game coming right up later today. I'm assuming you're listening to this on Sunday morning. So we'll see how the Celtics bounce back from this loss, but not a bad one. Just sometimes you lose the games that are winnable. This one was tied with a minute to spare. That's a good position to be in if you're the Celtics.